It's like the way I describe it to my students is like there's a young child who's going, hello, 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 and pulling at your trouser leg and wanting attention. But no, you're having a conversation with the grown-ups. and you're not neglecting the child. It's just like, hang on, just for 5 minutes, let me just talk. It's important. And you just kind of tune them out. And, not all the time, you give the child a lot of your love, but, maybe just for 5 minutes, you need to just tune them out because something important's going on. And this is like, hello, give me attention. And you don't, you tune it out. The top line is the very important adult conversation. And all this is like, hello, give me a sweet, give me attention, give me this, give me that. And you're like, you just tune it out. Hello and welcome to the Heart of the Piano YouTube channel. I'm Bob Rose. Welcome to this video where I'm going to be discussing one of the most common mistakes that non-professional pianists make. This is really the habit of listening to every single note that is being played. Just to kind of clarify, usually when we play a piece of music, there's a melody, there's a bass line, there's varying different levels of accompaniment, and what so many people just do wrong is they play listening to absolutely every single note equally. Now, basically, the format that this video is going to take, I'm going to include clips from loads of my past videos with loads of examples because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is so key, this is so important that in so many videos, I would say more than half of every video I've ever made, which is a tutorial, I talk about this in some form or another. So rather than just reinvent the wheel and come up with another way of trying to teach it, I'm going to be taking you back through clips of my past videos where I explain in the most clear ways exactly what this problem is and how you fix it. But to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through several bullet points. These are like a list of what these things are so that you're already prepared when you watch the original video clips. You can go, yes, it's that falls under this. It's basically, I think one of the biggest problems with the skill of bringing out melody and of pushing back the background is that this really doesn't get taught enough, and it especially really never gets taught to beginners. And I think that along the way, it's assumed that a lot of these skills you're going to pick up naturally by yourself as you get there. Almost no teachers will systematically break this down in the kind of way that I'm about to break this down. This is one of those things that usually, if you pick this up, you're talented and you progress further and maybe you become professional, or you don't. And then you either flounder or you carry on and things feel frustrating. But I'm breaking down for you in a systematic way how you, in a practical way, manage to have strategies to have certain things in the foreground and certain things in the background. I also want to point out that it's really important to realize it doesn't matter what difficulty level you are at. It doesn't matter if you're a complete beginner, because most of the pieces that I'm going to be presenting to you as examples are on the slightly more difficult end. They're sort of intermediate to advanced, but it doesn't matter because even if you're a beginner, you can take these principles and apply them to what you're doing. So if you're a beginner and you watch this all the way through and you think, oh my God, that was all just really intimidating, let me know in the comments below, and then I'll do my best to make a specific video about these kinds of issues geared specifically towards beginners. I personally don't think that that's needed, but if you tell me that's what's needed, I will absolutely do that. So a very common example of when this goes wrong is, for example, when people play Chopin, and there's in a lot of Chopin, like the waltzes and stuff like that, there can be a relatively difficult left hand which jumps about all over the place and a relatively simple right hand that just stays in one place. So what tends to happen with most non-professionals and people who, let's say, are not prodigies, who are not sort of naturally talented in that way that some 4-year-olds on YouTube can be naturally talented, what can happen with almost all non-professionals is that as we play, whatever feels more difficult, whatever you have to think about if one hand is doing something slightly trickier and it's moving around and is slightly more difficult. What tends to happen is that we're always practicing thinking about that more difficult thing, which means that we're always listening to it. And because we're listening to it, that's the thing that comes out. So the way that most people play is whatever particular technical thing is grabbing their attention, that's just where the mind goes. Now, the problem is that just means that whoever's listening to you is only going to sort of really register the things that you are thinking about, which tend to be the most difficult things. And I can tell you from a huge amount of experience that typically the most difficult things in any given moment that you're playing are usually not actually the things that you want people to be listening to. So really, the most important thing that I would want to get across about the skill of being able to communicate melody or something in the foreground that you want your listener to listen to, and of being able to push things into the background, is that the majority of what you need to be able to do is not technical. It's not what you do with your fingers, although there is a big element of that, and I will be teaching that. Don't just turn off because you think, oh, it's just woo-woo, philosophy stuff. No, I'm going to talk about technique, but what must come before thinking about what your fingers are doing and before the technique is the ability of being able to focus on what you want to be able to focus onto. So although I'm not playing at the moment, I'm going to be giving loads of examples of this. So whatever you are playing, whatever you're listening to, you need to start building the skill. And it is a skill because it's a thing that we practice. It's the skill of consciously deciding where we place our awareness and our focus. So if we're playing something with a difficult left hand that's jumping all over the place and the right hand is simple, we need to make a conscious decision that we are actually going to pay more attention to the sound of what's coming in the easy hand, because that's the more important thing rather than the tricky left hand. Now, if you keep watching, you're going to see loads and loads of examples on this. But basically, I call this like a magic telepathy. There is a magic telepathy to playing. So when you're playing, whatever you are imagining in your mind's ear. So, I talk about this in other videos. There's this thing called audiation. And audiation is like what visualization is to the mind, so to the eyes. So what visualization is to the eyes, and visualizing things, audiation is imagining sound. So whatever we are imagining in terms of sound as we're playing, there is a magic telepathy, and whoever's listening to us is going to sort of very strongly hear what we're imagining in our minds. So if we're playing, whatever we are paying attention to, that is going to be whoever is listening to us is going to pay attention to. And most of the time, that actually isn't what we want our audience to pay attention to. And again, there's going to be loads of examples of this. Just after I list all these individual points, there'll be loads of actual practical examples of this. So in a podcast that I recorded, and there'll be a link to my podcast below and to the specific episodes that I refer to. So the podcast, it's on Spotify and YouTube podcasts and, most of the places where you get podcasts. At some point, I'll transfer them over to YouTube. But there's some really important podcast episodes that I've done. I did a whole series on the most important key psychological skills that every pianist needs to master. One of them, number 4, the 4th key psychological skill, is practiced selective attention. I'm not going to go into all of that now. You can go and listen to that episode. But in many ways, it's a bit like meditation or like mindfulness. But it's the art of consciously deciding where you are placing your attention. And it's my experience that almost every single one of my students, almost every single non-professional pianist, when they're practicing, never thinks about where their awareness is going. They're just moving their fingers about and thinking, well, because I'm moving my fingers about, I am practicing, I am going to get better. But if you're not consciously choosing where your awareness goes, this is painfully slow progression. Becoming good at consciously choosing where your awareness goes is one of the key things that will enable you to rapidly improve and become, well, a master at the instrument in a relatively short amount of time. It's just one of the most important skills. And I guarantee you that people who are professionals are in absolute command of where their awareness is going. You know, think about your favorite musicians. They can be pianists, they can be other musicians. Think about the musicians who you think are the most incredible, that really deeply move you. Now, either imagine them or watch them live, whether it's on YouTube or, you know, live or wherever. Go watch them and see if you can kind of get into their skin, get into their mind, see if you can figure out what is it that they are aware of as they are playing. And I bet you that you're going to get this feeling that their mind is just not being yanked about, like just to things, oh, this is difficult, this is difficult. They're in absolute control of where their mind goes. This is one of the most important skills. Now, I mostly teach adults at the moment. I love the challenge of teaching adults. And one of the challenges of teaching adults is that adults want to feel competent. They want to feel good. As adults, we're used to feeling good at things. It's been a long time since we were kids, being forced to do things that we just weren't good at. So most people watching this video, you'll have spent some time learning. You feel some level of, yeah, I can move my fingers about. I know what I'm doing. But the moment that you get a teacher or there's a YouTube video and you start thinking, do I actually know where my awareness is going? What happens to a lot of my students, most of them, is that they get very threatened by the fact that this is suddenly a skill that they're not good at. And it can be very easy to have a load of psychological defenses come up. So that go, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't enjoy doing this, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm going to make another video about this another time. This is a whole deep rabbit hole. But basically, it's okay to not be good at stuff. If we embrace that, if we embrace the things that we're not yet good at, and it's natural. Almost none of my adult students are naturally good at this skill when I make them aware of it. But I have so many adult students who spend a lot of time working on it, even though it's very intimidating and it challenges a sense of us knowing what we're doing. And when we work on it, there are massive differences. So anyway, I've gone on about that for ages, but go listen to my podcast episode, key skill number 4, practice selective attention. So when we have that, technique then follows on from that, because really what technique is a means to an end. It's, you know, I would urge you not to think of technique as if I sit down and know what to do with my fingers and I'm very good at knowing if I move this exactly and I move this exactly and I do what my teacher said, suddenly I'm going to be an amazing pianist. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that, because playing the piano, being a musician, it's an art, not a science. And the art comes from the mind, from the body, from the soul. And if we're not consciously choosing where our awareness goes and we're just trying to control what happens with our fingers physically, I'm afraid it just doesn't really work like that. So key psychological skill number 4, practice selective attention. Then when we work on the technique, then it will help you unlock all the technique, and all of the physical, technical stuff that you work on will be so much easier then when you have a goal, when you know why you want to achieve all of this stuff. So from now on, I'm going to assume that what we're talking about is the art of bringing out a melody where everything else that is not the melody is basically being pushed to the background. It's not always the case. Sometimes we want to bring out like some of the lines that are deeper inside and we want to pull them out. But let's just, for the sake of keeping things simple for this tutorial, we're talking about a melody and an accompaniment. So one of the mistakes that so many of my students do is I explain all the techniques for bringing a melody out and pushing everything else into the background. And what a lot of people do in the beginning for a long time is they try to not listen to the background, which is a bit like trying not to visualize a purple elephant. Don't visualize a purple elephant. Whatever you do, do not visualize a purple elephant. So that's what a lot of people do when you know, I'm teaching all these different techniques to really focus in on the melody and push the the accompaniment, push everything else into the background. Push might not be the right word. And I'm going to give you a lot of strategies, a lot of different techniques for being able to do this. What you don't want to do, you want to be careful that you don't start trying to not listen to the background, because all you're going to do is you're just going to listen to the background. Trying not to listen to it means you're going to listen to it. So don't do that. So one of the most useful things that we need to be able to do, again, this is a little bit more on the psychological side. I am going to get to all the technical stuff, so, keep tuned in. I was talking about my podcast and the key psychological skills. Key psychological skill number 2 is called magic wand practice. Now, I'm not going to talk about it too much here. That's for a whole different video, and I also covered it in the podcast episode. But basically, one of the reasons why so many people can't help but be yanked into listening to things that they don't really want to be listening to, which is in the background. Like I said before, a lot of the time, something that we're playing in the background might be technically not completely straightforward. So if we're playing something in the background that has a jump or that has quite a lot of fast notes, what a lot of people do is they practice in a way that each time they practice this difficult left hand, they're having to really think about it. And if you're thinking about it, that means you're listening to it and it's not going to be in the background. So what we want to be able to do is we want to find a way of being able to play the difficult things that we don't want to listen to that are in the background. We want to find a way of playing them where they are effortless and we don't need to think about them. And this is something that most of my students are not disciplined enough. They know they should do it, but they're not really disciplined enough to have this as the strong intention. And so much of this is about intention. When you sit down and practice, your goal needs to be, in this practice session, how can I make it so that what I'm playing here is something that I can play and do in my sleep and do while having a conversation and do while completely not thinking about it. So in that podcast episode, I talk about some of the strategies for how you can achieve this. And another really, really important strategy for how we get this magic wand practice. Again, people who listen to a lot of my podcasts or watch a lot of my videos, there's a word I use a lot, I use all the time. It's called interoception. It's spelled up here. So this word interoception, I've just spoken about it a lot. I'm not going to explain it again completely from scratch, but it's the felt sense of everything going on inside our body. It is the direct physical experience of what is going on inside our body. It's not thinking about what's going on with our body. So if we can label it with thoughts, if we're thinking about what the body is doing and we can attach a word to it, that's not interoception, that's thinking about our body. Interoception is the direct felt physical experience, which is pre-verbal. It happens before we even have a chance to put words on it. It's infinitely subtle. There's so many nuances to it. The words couldn't even get close to describing it. It's being in our body rather than being up in our heads, staring at everything, trying to control our body like it's a puppet. I feel like I've more or less explained it now completely from scratch, but anyway, it's being deeply embodied. I'm in my body feeling absolutely everything. Now, if you imagine, if I want to play something in the left hand that's really, really tricky and difficult, and what most amateur pianists do is they stare at it, they think about it a lot, they sort of think from their fingertips, and they're not really deeply feeling into their whole bodies as we play. What we want to do is we want to learn how it feels to play this tricky passage completely from our bodies, like as if our bodies are a very sophisticated pet horse, pet cat, pet dog, and we're training it to kind of do complicated tricks, And to do this, we have to take it in tiny, tiny bits, slowly, patiently, until the body just knows what it feels like, and you put it together with the sound. But eventually we want to be able to play with no input from the mind, from the head. It just goes itself, and it only really does this if you make the real effort of feeling everything very, very strongly from not just your hands and your fingers, but really in many ways your entire body. Your body plays it. When your body can play it, then with your mind you can listen to what's going on in the other hand and think about that. And the rest of it is just on autopilot, so it can go in the background. I cannot stress enough how important that is. And I think that very few teachers will explain that is what you have to do. But that is what good people do. It's a case of putting it on autopilot by being deeply introspective. Only when you're introspective can that be something that you do without being able to think about it that much. If you think about it, just think about what most of you out there are going to be practicing with your neck forwards. You're going to be thinking really hard. There's not going to be much going on in your wrist, in your arms, in your hands. It's almost like you don't have a body. And if you're like that, well, you're always going to have to be consciously thinking about how to play that thing that you're playing. But when you relax your mind, you bring your neck back, you get into your body, you go slower over and over, like you're teaching an animal a trick, until it's your hand, your body can just play this thing. Then it can just go in the background. So again, there's going to be lots of examples of this once I've given you all these different points. So another really important thing that you're going to see in some of the video clips later are really important strategies and techniques for chord weighting. And so chord weighting is the skill of, if you're playing more than one note at a time in one hand, how do you make one note louder than the other one? You can imagine this is important if you've got a melody going on in the right hand and the right hand's also playing other things at the same time. You're going to need to know how you lean on one note and bring that note out more than the others. So there's going to be some of the most important strategies for how you get good at that chord weighting. And something else that's going to come up over and over again as well is the importance of being able to listen to notes as they die away. So, the piano is basically a percussion instrument, technically a percussion instrument. But, I don't really hear it in that kind of way. I hear it as a lyrical singing instrument. And so, in many ways, we are magicians. I'm not a magician, but my understanding of being a magician is that a lot of what you do is about misdirection. So if you're doing a magic trick, you have to hide that you're doing something with one hand, or you're hiding something at one point. So if you're really thinking about the thing that you're hiding and you look at it as you do it, the audience is going to immediately cotton on to what you're doing. So you have to misdirect by making the audience pay attention to something else. And one of the ways that you do that is by you really pay attention to what you want them to pay attention to, and you hide the other thing. So if we're playing a melody in the right hand and the note starts to die away, and then we play other notes in the left hand and we pay attention to these notes in the left hand, well, then the audience is not going to be paying attention to those notes in the right hand. They're going to listen to the notes in the left hand. And by the way, when I say audience, I don't want to intimidate or put off people who are not going to be playing to big audiences. By audience, I really mean anybody who's going to listen, whether that's your pets or your mum and dad or your significant other, your loved ones, or any level of performing, or it could be an exam, or it could even be, when I'm playing on my own, it's almost like there are two Bobs. There's two versions of me. There's me performing, and then there's me listening. And, that's a really deep rabbit hole. I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but, have a little reflect on, even if you're playing for yourself, there's you, the listener, and you, the performer. And you, the performer, you can pay attention to the things that you want you, the listener, to be paying attention to. And it's just going to be so much more of a rewarding, enriching experience, rather than just playing a whole mass of notes that's nowhere near as satisfying. So related to this idea of listening to notes as they die away is to be able to follow the larger line. It's like, if playing an instrument is like a language, then we play in terms of sentences and paragraphs and words. And what a lot of people do is they're going to be playing in letters. It would be like, I've made some bullet points here. It would be like going o, n, e, o, v, m, o, s, rather than one of most foundational skills. That we want to play, that we're playing in sentences, which means that you are listening to the sentences. Now, if you play a note, then listen to all the other things going on in the left hand, then go back to this note, then go back to the left hand. You're not listening in sentences. And so, basically, there's a video I've got coming up shortly. I don't want to give too much away about it, but it's going to be called something along the lines of what pianists can learn from plane crashes. And, again, I don't want to give away too much, but basically, I think that for a lot of my life, I believed that whatever my senses could appreciate would be there in my subconscious somewhere. So even if I'm not paying attention fully to something, somewhere in my subconscious, it's deep in there and I can get access to it. And so in a way, I think that a lot of people play in this way that they think, well, I don't have to really pay attention to the melody notes. They're just there. Can't they just be there subconsciously? But, if I'm playing a melody note in the right hand, and then something happens in my left hand and my mind gets yanked and pulled onto that left hand, and I'm no longer listening to that or even aware of that melody note in the right hand, in many ways, it's like that doesn't exist. And I'm saying doesn't exist because even subconsciously in your mind, your brain can only do so many things. It can only be aware of so many things. It will push stuff out. So if you're playing a melody note and then your mind gets yanked onto something else, that melody note literally doesn't exist anymore. The sound might physically be going through the air, but if you're not aware of it, it's not there to your consciousness. And if it's not there to your consciousness, it's not going to be there for the consciousness of people who are listening to you, because there is a magic telepathy. You're a magician, and what you pay attention to is what they pay attention to. So that melody note just stops existing. So you want to, anyway, I'm going to be talking about this in the clips that are coming up. So related to this is the importance that I talk about frequently of singing. Now, I just want to make something super, super clear about something that I say quite a lot in the video clips that are coming up. I think in some of them I joke that I force my students to sing. Now, I just want to make clear, I never force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. Really, what I mean when I say that I force my students to sing is I very strongly encourage them. And if they really, really don't want to sing, which some of my students really, really don't, then I don't make them. Then I'm like, oh, okay. But I do very strongly encourage all my students to sing. But, some of us have a little bit of trauma around this. We've had bad experiences in our lives with singing and people saying our singing sucks or whatever. So it's okay, if you're a student, you don't have to sing, but I strongly encourage it. And so there's quite a lot of reasons for this. One of the main ones is that it's a really strong window into what you're paying attention to. So if you are able to sing something, that means that you are able to pay attention to that melody. What happens with so many of my students, even my advanced students, is I get them to sing a melody, and as the left hand then plays a different note, but the melody's carrying on in the right hand, it'll be like la, 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 and they start to sing what's in the left hand, even though they know they shouldn't be. They know they should only be singing what's in the right hand in the melody, but they can't help it, la, 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 because it's a sign, it's a flag that they are paying all their attention to instantly what happens in the left hand. They are listening to it, whether they're aware of it or not, whether they think, oh, I'm not listening to it. But if they're playing and they play it and they sing that note, trying not to, but they're just compulsively sing that note, well, that's just a sign that, well, yes, you are listening to it, and that's in the foreground of your mind. So singing is just a really strong test of what is it that you're actually listening to. And again, there's going to be lots of examples of this in the clips that are coming up. So not only that, this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, which I'm going to indulge in, and I hope you're patient as I indulge this. It's very relevant. There's a lot of research. There's a theory with a lot of evidence that shows that when we are paying attention to sounds in our environment, when we are listening to something, we know we're listening to it because physically, our bodies reflect this in some way, like our vocal cords, our tongue, our mouth have very, very subtle, very subconscious kind of mirroring of the sound that we're listening to. So one of the most sort of famous, if you want to call it famous, one of the most popular examples of this is if you put someone in an fMRI scanner. It's like a functional magnetic imaging. It's a brain scanner that you can go into while you're conscious, and it measures stuff going on in the brain in real time. And if somebody talks to you and you measure what's going on in the brain, you can see in the brain, in the deep parts of the brain that control just the beginnings of like movement in the body, like the premotor cortex and the insular cortex and stuff like this, that you know, in the deep parts of the brain, which are the very beginnings of motion before you actually have any motion, before you're even conscious of them. When you're listening to somebody speak, your larynx, your vocal cords, your tongue, your mouth are physically imagining what it's like, imagining the sensation of saying what it is that you are listening to. And it does this in complete synchrony, like anticipating what that person is saying. It's like you're locked in a dance with that. And in a deep sense, to listen is to imagine with our vocal cords. And another sort of example might be to imagine the sound of a huge rumbling truck or lorry going outside your house. And, you know, if you really, really deeply imagine this sound, really, really imagine that sound, I bet you that even subconsciously, like maybe even a little bit consciously, you can start to become aware of your vocal cords, imagining, you know, in a way, my vocal cords couldn't possibly make that sound because I'd have to be a giant elephant-sized creature to actually make that kind of a sound with my vocal cords. But in my brain, the brain is imagining, well, what if I had vocal cords that huge that could make that sound? And to hear that sound is in a way to imagine having the kind of body and vocal cords that could make that kind of sound. So in a deep sense, to imagine any sound, our body imagines making it. So if we're playing the piano, if we consciously imagine what would it feel like with our vocal cords and with our mouth to make the sound that is happening, that is in a deep way to truly be listening to that sound. So if we're playing and singing, we are really listening. We're getting closer into listening. Now, you know, I go and see a lot of the world's best pianists regularly. I go to a lot of concerts, and I don't know how many of you guys do this because you won't notice this so much on recordings. This gets hidden on recordings. But when you go watch people playing live, almost every single pianist who I watch, I'd say like maybe 9/10 of all the pianists who I go and watch, do some kind of humming or singing as they play, because I'm always sitting in the front row. I like being super close and, you know, feeling, really watching and getting close to what people are doing. And they're all humming or singing. And, you know, if you watch this on YouTube or you listen to recordings, a lot of the time you won't notice this because recording engineers hate this and they do everything in their power to hide this. But actually, you know, most of the world's greatest pianists do some kind of humming or singing. So, you know, this is really useful and really important, but you don't have to sing, you don't have to, but hopefully you can see why this is really useful. So again, something else that I talk about in some of the clips that are coming up is the importance of visually not looking at the key, at any key, at the moment that the finger actually pushes it down, unless you really want to be deeply listening to that note. In some of my other videos, I say never, ever look at a key at the moment that you push it down. Maybe I should have add the caveat that sometimes, well, you can look at it if you really, really deeply want to listen to it. But what happens is if you're playing a melody with the right hand, and then you are actually physically looking at the key at the moment that the finger pushes it down, what you're basically saying to your brain is to listen to it, because whatever we look at is to pay attention to, is to listen. Looking and listening are so deeply intertwined. Now, sometimes we just have to be able to look at something, to be able to get to somewhere. I'm not saying never look down at your hands, but what you do is you can glance just before you physically push the key down. Now, glancing just before you push it down can be a very, very quick thing that doesn't really interfere with your listening too much. But if you are looking at the moment that you push the key down, that completely disrupts the listening circuits in your brain, and it means you are listening to it. In my opinion, you cannot visually look at a key as you push it down and not listen to it. You will be listening to it. You cannot look at something and just make it in the background. So another thing that we're going to look at is the importance of looking at the musical skeleton. That sometimes when we open the sheet music on a brand new piece, and there are so many notes, there's just so much going on. What's important? What is it that we actually want people to listen to? And what is it that we actually want to be in the background? And sometimes this can be one of the most advanced skills that any pianist ever gets, when there's a lot going on and we make really deep decisions about, well, I think this I want to pull out and show to people, and this I'm going to just push back a little bit. But what we can do is we can, with a brand new piece, we can choose to learn it in a way where we are only playing the most important notes. That might be the bass line and the melody, or it might be the particular counterpoints, but sometimes the melody is hidden. Sometimes the melody is hidden in the mass of notes. So we just pull out the melody notes and sort of ignore all the other notes. Again, that's going to be in the clips that are coming up, really, really important thing. But basically, to sum up in general, what amateurs and non-professional pianists do wrong, is like so commonly, is just listening to every note that they play, particularly the difficult ones that they're yanked to, and also individual notes like this note, this note, this note, this note, like listening to a mass of individual notes rather than a flow of sentences, like going, sometimes I talk about the art of being able to listen horizontally rather than vertically. Again, this is a very deep rabbit hole. I need to go into this in a whole different video. But it's like, I think to try and come up with an analogy, what a lot of people do when they play is like, we want to play as if we're flowing down a relatively fast flowing river. We're just going with the current. But that's quite scary to a lot of people, just to go with that current. And people want to keep grabbing onto the bank and going, it's this thing, it's this thing, it's here. There's a saying, it's not completely the same, but there's a saying that you can never step in the same river twice. Which is basically, the river's always changing, it's always flowing, it's never the same, it's constantly moving. And as you're playing, you're going with this sense of everything constantly moving, rather than this note, this note, this note. Like, it's like you're going down the river, but you're grabbing, then you grab here, then you grab here, you grab here, and you're going down by grabbing hold of the bank. You've just got to flow down the river. So, this is then being able to listen to the melody and not being yanked into all the other stuff. Now, it's not just as simple as, just do that, because you need to know how to achieve these things. Again, there's infinite rabbit holes I can go down, but these clips, we're almost there. These clips coming up, I show you the practical ways of being able to do this. So before we get to that, just very quickly, if this video is useful for you, please do take the time to support the channel by clicking on like and subscribe and clicking on the bell icon. I'm actually doing this specific video precisely because I'm about to do a whole load of tutorials for the new ABRSM Grade 8 2025. It's almost 2025. So I'm going to be doing a load of tutorials. This concept is so important to almost every single video. So, and also I do have space in my online studio for online students. If you're interested, there's going to be a link in the description below. So that's enough from me waffling. So here are the clips. I know they're going to be really, really useful for you. So enjoy. I really recommend being able to hear the tune. And singing it. My students know that I really love to make them sing. They don't always enjoy singing, but singing, it's important to be able to sing it. When you're playing, somewhere in your mind, you want to be able to hear. And you don't have to be able to sing well, you know, that's not important. What is important is that you are as if you are singing it in your vocal cords. Because if you don't, and you're just like hitting levers, it's just not the same. So anyway, make sure get rid of all of the middle bit. Just play the bass. And then. And make absolutely sure when you start learning this piece that you absolutely can hear this tune. Because then when you actually start learning it properly, everything else you want to almost be ignoring it, because I think that for a lot of people there's a temptation to play as if every note is important. All these other notes in the middle, it's like you almost want to just tune them out. And it's here a little bit, and then they can be a little bit more expressive. But the rest of it, you don't even really want to hear it. So I think that this is something that most of my students do not practice enough, and that is to practice what is it that you're listening to. Can you play and only hear the melody? So, and then can you play and only listen to the middle bit? Oh God, that's quite hard. Now the thing is, it might sound like I'm deliberately making some things louder and some things quieter, but actually, when you choose to really focus on one part of it, like 90%, you find that everything else naturally becomes quieter. So when I started sort of really listening to the middle part, the tune naturally becomes quieter. When I listen to the tune, that naturally becomes louder and everything else naturally becomes quieter. There's, I suppose, a little bit of awareness that my fingers are making a little bit of difference, but if you are listening to the top line will be louder than everything else. If you're just listening to every single note, then it's just going to just be a mass of notes. And also you want to listen to the bass as well. So. And then when you ultimately perform it, you want mostly the melody, a little bit of bass, very, very little of the filler. In fact, the filler could almost be completely different notes, and it wouldn't even really matter all that much. And because the left hand jumps around, one of my biggest bugbears when I listen to a lot of people play Chopin is that a lot of the time Chopin, like waltzes and nocturnes, it's got a really simple right hand with the left hand that jumps. So what people do is they stare at their left hand, which means that the right hand it's not that loud, and the thing that comes out is the left hand. So you want to make sure that, and I've spoken about this on the podcast in the past, whatever you're playing, you only want to be looking at the note that you're playing as you're playing it. If you want that note to sing, if you want it to be loud. So for example, we can look. And that's really over the top. But every single time that I played this melody at the top, I looked at that note as I played it. What you don't want to do is to be looking at the left hand as those notes get played. Because then that's going to bring out your left hand. And I think a lot of people who are going to learn this piece, because here's the right hand just sits here. Whoops. And apart from a couple of places where with tiny jumps, it's just all in one place. So we don't really need to look at it all that much. And then here's the left hand. And there's a lot of jumps. The left hand sort of involves a lot more awareness of jumps and where it is than the right hand. But here's the thing, if you want to play this well, you need to absolutely stop yourself from looking at the left hand at the moment at which it touches a note. So for example, let's take, if you use the fingering that's suggested, and I'll talk about this in a minute. So if you play it with the fingering that's suggested, you have a jump from this thumb to this note. So what a lot of people are going to want to do is to do this and to look at that G when it lands. You cannot do this. Please don't do this. And it's going to take a lot of willpower for a lot of people to not do this, because your eyes will just draw you in. It's almost like your eyes, in fact it is, your eyes, in my opinion, have just as strong a muscle memory as your fingers do when you learn a piece. So if you're used to doing this, to stop your eyes doing that is very hard. So what you want to do is you look just before, if you're about to jump, you look to where you're jumping to, then you don't look at the moment that actually plays. Because in the moment that this finger plays the G in the left hand, you're listening to this note. And in my opinion, you cannot really be listening to that note if you're staring at that note. You need to be focused on this note, either visually looking at that note, or even better, just like with your eyes closed. Because you actually can play quite a lot of this opening with your eyes closed. You need to glance here and then have your eyes closed. And then open, close. You can do all that with your eyes closed. Or if you're reading from the sheet music, you keep your eye on the sheet music, so you look down and then sheet music. Or if you must, right hand. You look at the note that has the melody. This is going to come up over and over again in my tutorials. This is so important that you do not want to be looking, unless you absolutely have to for insanely complicated technical reasons. You really do not want to be looking anywhere that is not the tune at the moment that note gets played. Anyway, so hopefully I've been quite sort of persuasive about that, because that's going to be a very tough habit to break for a lot of people. So then something else that you want to do, you want to always choose where your awareness is. So what might be tempting, the right hand here is really easy, you don't need to move your hand, but here, and then, now what most people will do, which is not good, what most people will do is they'll go, because the left hand is the thing you've got to think more about in terms of what the hands are doing. This is just easy. So this is a bit more. So what most people will do is they will put their awareness and attention on the left hand. Don't do that. Basically, you want to practice it enough so that the left hand is just completely automatic. You don't need to think about it. I'm here having a conversation. I'm barely thinking about it. It's in the background. So when I'm playing, this is where my focus is. Dum, dum, dum. This can come out a little bit here, but only a little bit. You just start to listen to it a little bit, and then it goes back. This is why so many teachers and teachers on YouTube and, all the time, they're always singing. It's a reflection of where your awareness is. You don't want to be playing boom, 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 boom. You want to be going da, da, da. I don't know what octave to sing in. Da, 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 da. And another reason for doing that, what most people will do is when they get to here, and they play the left hand, it's like this note has stopped existing completely. It's like it dropped off the end of the earth. And then it just doesn't exist. But you want to still hear it. Still listening to that note, decaying. Still listening to that note. It hasn't disappeared. This will affect how your audience, and by audience it can be your mum or dad or your dog, but when you play you need to think that there is an audience, and what are they listening to? And if you're just listening to, that audience is going to listen to what you are listening to. You have to listen to the thing that you want people to listen to. So now, hopefully you can tell by a magic telepathy that I am listening to that melody, even when I'm then playing the left hand after it. This is important if you want to play this kind of stuff well. If we want the E flat to come out loudly and the other notes not loudly, what we can do is we can imagine I'm playing thumb and little finger on the quiet notes, and then second finger on the E flat. We can imagine that the second finger on the E flat, it's like steel. It's like jabby, it's pokey, it's strong. It's like a strong thing. The thumb and the little finger are like cotton wool. They're soft, they're yielding. So as you play, these fingers yield. The second finger, the index finger, it's strong and jabby. Now, another way of thinking about this is you could just play. So basically what I'm doing is I'm playing the chord and immediately coming up with the thumb and little finger and playing them really, really quietly, like this. Another way we can do this is just go, and what I'm doing here is I'm playing the chord, but the thumb and the little finger are touching the keys and not going down, but the second finger is playing. And I think the thumb and little finger are ever so slightly just pushing down on the keys, but not much. The other thing as well is just really get used to hearing, like listen for this note. So when you play the chord, don't listen to the other notes, just listen out for that E flat. So something else that you want to be quite careful with. People who are not so musical are just gonna bring out this bottom. But I mean, normally composers don't even bother putting this, but Rachmaninoff is so clear. He wants the left hand pianissimo and the right hand mezzo forte. Now, normally most composers wouldn't even bother. They would just write pianissimo and just expect that you would play the right hand louder. But he's crystal clear here. Pianissimo. So you really want to push this out of your awareness, and then mezzo forte. And the way to do this is to ignore the left hand. Just don't even listen to it. What a lot of people do who are less musical is they go no, 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 and that they're listening to every note. And it's really, really important that you get out of this way of listening, which is sort of listening to notes. It's listening to this note and this note and this note, because the whole piece demands a very holistic way of perceiving it, because the tune is long. You want to be aware of the tune as you're playing. You want to be aware of it's not finished yet, it's not finished yet. dum dum. It's still not finished. Even though there's a rest, it's still not finished. Dum da da dum, dum dum da da da. Still not finished. Still not finished. Dum 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 dum. Still not finished. Dum da da dum dum dum. Still not finished. Da 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 dum da dum. Still not finished. Da da dum dum da 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 dum. Still not finished. Dum da 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 da. Still not finished. Da da dum 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 dum. 2, 3, 4. And now we have a very quick breath. We've kind of finished. And then da da dum dum, because it's you know, that was one sentence. That was one sentence. We take a breath and it's the next sentence. Da dum dum da dum da dum dum. Breathe. Da 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 dum da 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 dum da dum. Still not finished. Da dum 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 dum. Not finished. Da da dum dum da 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 dum. Absolutely not finished. Da 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 dum da 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 da. Not finished. Da 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 dum da dum dum. And obviously not finished. Dum da 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 dum da da dum da 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 da. Sorry, I'm jumping octaves with my voice. Da da dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da dum. Not finished. Da dum 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 da 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 da. Seamless. Da da dum da. Bloody blind, the right hand in the background. Da 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 da. Bloody blind in the background. Da 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 da. Obviously not finished. Da da. So this has been going on a long time. Da 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 da. And we've kind of come to a natural rest, and then da da. This is a coda. This is just like an extra bit at the end now. Da da da. And one more thing. Da da. Where do I find this note? Da 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 da. Winding down. Da dum dum dum. So when you're playing, you want to be aware that this is almost one massive melody. You are not. Let's go from the second part. You are not just going da da dum dum and then da da da. You know, you are not thinking one note at a time. You are aware of the entire line and where it's going. So even as you're starting, you want to almost hold the entire architecture, the entire arch of this whole melody in your mind. So even as you play the first note, you get this sense that you know where it's going. You know that there's this massive sort of constant melody that's coming, and your awareness is on that and not on the individual notes. So important, because that's what you need to be naturally musical with this. Do not focus in on individual notes. When we perform and when we feel under pressure, our nervous system naturally takes us into a more of a narrow focus where we lose this wider awareness. We need this wider, so lean back, and just be aware of the whole piece, the whole thing. Rocking from side to side gently helps you to be aware of the fact that there is a larger structure. If your body is very still and your neck is forwards and you don't feel in your body, chances are you are not aware of this larger structure. It's so important. I mean, anyone can just sit down and do something like this. Blah blah whatever. But if you want to really bring out the tune, I was going to sing and then I thought, no, I can't sing it. I'm going to sing really badly. But you want the melody. Okay, maybe I will sing a bit. I have to sing in the right octave. I can't sing that high. And that's a really long phrase. It's a massive phrase. We don't want to hear the thumb. We want to hear as little of that thumb as possible. So we want to hear, and also we don't just want to hear all those thirds. We really just want to hear just that top line. And so on and so on. So very tricky. There's two aspects to that. One is you need to have the right technique to be able to get that sound. And more importantly, and I think this comes really before the technique, you have to get really good at dividing your awareness and your mind and your focus, that you're mostly listening to that top note. If you're listening to you won't really focus on the top line. So for me, when I play this, I am listening, and that's why I sing, and that's why piano teachers sing sometimes really badly, because it's to show what it is that you're listening to and where your focus is. So let me actually try and sing it very badly in the right octave. And I'm singing that badly because that's where my focus is. And when I'm doing that, I'm not listening to all this other stuff going on. If I'm not really focusing on that line and I don't imagine I can sing it, I'll end up with something more like this. Which is like just a bunch of notes. We never just want to play a bunch of notes. We want to make music, and the music is... So something I recommend, and I recommend this to all my students, and I recommend this to all my students on whatever piece they're playing, is you want to figure out what's the most important bits. What's, I call it a skeleton, but it's not really a skeleton, because it's sort of more like you want the meat of it rather than the bones, But this is like this is the skeleton to me. And if we go on, that's the skeleton. And you know, it's up to you to decide how you're going to pull this apart and figure out what the most important bits are. But that's the kind of work that I recommend doing to start with, to get to know the piece, because it's not just a question of just learn all the notes. You have to hear da, da, dum, da, 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 and everything else is in the background. So one way of practicing it is, can you actually push all this stuff so you almost ignore it? It's like, the way I describe it to my students is like there's a young child who's going, hello, 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 and pulling at your trouser leg and wanting attention. But no, you're having a conversation with the grown-ups. and you know, you're not neglecting the child. It's just like, hang on, just for 5 minutes, let me just talk. It's important. And you just kind of tune them out. And, you know, not all the time, you know, you give the child a lot of your love, but, you know, maybe just for 5 minutes, you need to just tune them out because something important's going on. And this is like, hello, give me attention. And you don't, you tune it out. The top line is the very important adult conversation. And all this is like, hello, give me a sweet, give me attention, give me this, give me that. And you're like, you just tune it out. Anyway, so one thing I will just say is you need to experiment with how your fingers move and how everything feels. I think that what a lot of my students do, and I talk about this on my podcast, so do listen to the podcast for more sort of tips about this, but what a lot of people do is they stare and they think very hard about what they want, and they don't feel what their hands are doing and what their wrist is doing and what their arms are doing. Now, if you want to bring out like that, it is essential that you are really, really inside the sensations of your hands and your fingers. I talked about this in the previous video where I was talking about another one of these grade 8 pieces. That was the ragtime one. I think it was the ragtime one. Yeah. And I was talking about interoception being the experiencing of all the nuanced physical sensations inside the body, as opposed to feeling like a puppet master, where you are the puppet master and your body is the puppet, and we're not feeling it. No, we need to feel it from the inside. And then I can feel in my fingers and in my hands all the subtle nuances, and I can adjust and change stuff. If you are just thinking, right, I need that, but you're not feeling it, it's going to be very hard to do this. So something you might want to experiment with is how you move the finger at the top. You might want to move it more. So like, for example, this finger's playing the melody, this finger isn't. You might want to experiment with things like this, particularly with your little finger. Something else you might want to experiment with is wrist rotation, where you if the melody is at the top, then very often we can rotate the wrist and get, because we're pivoting around the thumb, the further away we get from the thumb, the more leverage that we have, and the louder that note is going to be. But not in a, oh, you're staring at it and you try and make it work. You feel it and you try and sort of feel it intuitively how that works. Most of what I'm doing is rotation, and when I play, I kind of lean into the outside with my arm weight. And then there are times like in bar 4, this note here, this B flat in the melody with the A flat, it's so hard to not just go and play both notes loudly. It's very, very hard to get that B flat louder than the A flat. And in that moment, I really do lift my third finger up quite high. And when I lift my third finger up high, hopefully you can see that, it's then much easier to get that third finger louder. When we get to the B section, it's really, really important that these chords in the right hand, and again, I use a lot of rotation for that, so I rotate into that little finger. It's very impractical to just make the little finger louder than the other fingers, because the little finger is one of your weakest fingers. So you have the chord ready to play, and you do that, and you play like that, and then you don't really play with your little finger. You rotate like this, so all the fingers don't really move a lot. And then you'll find that little finger is so much louder than the other fingers. But don't just try and move it more. And then this definitely won't work. If all your fingers are there, and then you just try and make it louder, that's not going to work. So you have to feel and experiment with your arms, with your wrists, with you know, everything. But don't just try and do this, which I think a lot of my students would do. They just stay very, very close. They don't move any other fingers. Like they don't move fingers. I mean, you could just move the little finger and go. And that's better. That's better than just trying to do that. But really, what you need to do is something like this. So before I play that chord in bar 30, I'm actually above the keys and I rotate and drop onto it. And that really does make the little finger louder. And I don't really play using the little finger itself. I rotate onto it. Especially important here. Whoops. And here, that G sharp in bar 32 at the top needs to be really quite loud. And the way that I get that is I drop onto it, and I drop on with rotation and leaning into that top note, not with the little finger. It's not strong enough. Yeah, it's been a few days since I've done this. So it's da dum da ba ba. The little finger doesn't really move. It looks like that. And then here in bar 36 going into 37, you have to bring the A out in bar 37. So what I do is I'm like this. My second finger that plays the A is very pokey, really straight, and the other fingers are sort of squishy and pliable. So from 36, and you can hear that second finger is much, much louder. But I recommend that anybody learning this piece sort of learns the skeleton of it. And so the skeleton, it's like all the various tunes without all the filler. So from the beginning, it's like... Now, I think that the melody there goes to the D. So from the end of bar 2, I'm going to go from the beginning of bar 2. F sharp, E, D. Now, I'm playing F sharp. I'm playing the F sharp at the bottom, the D in the middle, the F sharp at the top. But to me, the melody clearly goes dum, dum, dum. And not that. I've heard, I think on the official ABRSM recording he does this. But I don't think it does that. I think it does this. Which is different. I am still playing the top note, it's very, very quiet. So it's tricky because you don't want to just play this. It's got to be very, very balanced. So all the stuff with your right hand thumb at the beginning, very, very quiet, not this. Which I would imagine some people will do, especially at grade 7 level. We lean into the upper note. We want to bring this line out over all the other stuff. And one way we do this is by really, really listening to it. And another way we can do it, a lot of you are not going to do this, but you should. You really should, especially if you're just in the privacy of your own home. And I was just singing really badly in the last video that I recorded. And you want to be able to go, da, 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 da. Even if it's bad singing, the important thing is that you are hearing the line in your mind, even if it's not quite coming out of your mouth, you know. Da, 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 dum, da, 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 dum, da, 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 dun, dum, da, 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 da. It's so important that you are able to do that, because that is a sign that you're listening to the right thing. Because the way that most people, I think, are going to play this is just like, am I playing all the correct notes? Am I playing all the correct notes? And it becomes like, well, I joke with some of my students. There's a psychologist from decades ago called Skinner, and the type of psychology that he kind of invented or perfected is behavioralism. It's like conditioning. I'm not going to go too much into it, but he made most of his discoveries by having rats in cages, and he made the rats press levers for rewards or to avoid punishments. And I joke with my students that a lot of the time, the way that they're playing is like they're rats pressing the correct levers to get the reward, which is a pat on the head. It's like, oh, well done. It's like, am I pressing the correct levers? Yes, I've pressed all the correct levers. I'm good. That's not what being a musician is about. It's not about being a rat pressing the levers. Whereas, and when we sing it, it's one way to get us out of that state of mind, because when that state of mind takes us over, that we're pressing the levers, it's kind of addictive. And this is, you know, in the same way that rats could just press a lever over and over and over and over again for particular kinds of rewards, some pianists just get obsessed with playing all the correct notes and pressing the correct levers because it's kind of addictive. We don't want that. Now, obviously, so many obvious things. We don't want this. We want the melody to be reasonably loud, not pianissimo. We want the melody to be MP, MF. And then everything else, PPP. This is tricky in the left hand. Make sure you practice this. And making sure that the left hand, because the left hand is the trickiest thing here. It's a very common problem for amateur players. That the most difficult thing is what everyone stares at, because it's quite difficult to play. The right hand here is relatively easy. So a lot of people are going to stare at the left hand. But we want the left hand to whisper, to breeze, you know, like the wind rippling across a field, which actually leads to the poem that Debussy originally based this on, but we'll come to that later. So you want, if anything, you want to be looking at your right hand at the top note. That, you know, that's what you want to be thinking about. And making sure that this left hand is not too obvious. And then the other thing as well is that most of the time the left hand is quite difficult. There's a lot of jumping about, and the right hand tends to stay in one place. And again, people who've watched my other videos and listened to some of my podcast episodes will know that that's a real problem, especially when we play things like Chopin waltzes, where the right hand doesn't move much and the left hand's all over the place, or nocturnes. And then you end up just bringing the left hand out. So anyway, when we get to let's say from bar 6, but it's really all the way through the piece, we want this. Excuse my bad singing. you can hear, that is a long melody. And I think that most people who play this piece at grade 8, they're going to be oblivious that that is the long melody. Oh, excuse me. That's the long melody. That's what we need to follow. So if we play like... where it's kind of obvious that I'm not listening to the melody, that's not going to sound so good. And there is like a magic telepathy to playing music, especially on the piano, because we're playing so many different lines, that if you are listening to the part that's most important, your audience will hear it. But the temptation, when you play the rest of this bar, to most people it's as if that F in bar 7, the F in the melody, just stopped existing after we played it. That's one reason why teachers like to make their students sing. It forces you to keep listening to that note, even though you're playing other stuff. It forces you to keep listening to it, and most people won't do that. They will do something like, when they try and sing, they'll go da 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 ba 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 ba, even when they're trying to sing the top line. So this is the reason why I make, well, I don't make, but I very strongly encourage my students to sing. If they really don't want to sing, I don't make them, but I strongly encourage. So the trick is, and again, this comes down to, like anyone who listens to my podcast, and there's the key 4 psychological skills. Key psychological skill number 4 is, can you follow with your awareness the things that you want to focus on without getting pulled here, there and everywhere by technical things that are grabbing your attention? So can you just, is it possible when you play from bar 6 to just really only focus on the tune? Now, hopefully you could hear that I am absolutely focusing on the melody and following it all the way through. And that is really hard for most people, because for most people, it's like really like, am I playing all the correct notes? Am I playing all the correct notes in the left hand? You have to practice this in such a way so that, and this is, I can't remember which of my key psychological skills this is, but it's like magic wand practice. It's like, can you just play this like someone took over your body and cast a magic spell, and you don't have to do anything? The amount of effort that I'm putting into playing that is 0. And it's not because I'm better. It's not because I'm a better pianist. It's because I practice doing that. So you need to practice how to go and then play your left hand so effortlessly and securely that you don't need to look at it, you don't need to think about it, you feel it. And I think, again, this is another weakness that most students have. They don't feel enough physically, and with a thing called interoception, the inside of your body. When I play this, I don't need to listen to it, I don't need to look at it, I don't need to think about it, because I can feel that I'm playing the right notes. I can feel it. So I don't need to listen to it or think about it. And what it's like, one analogy that I use, it's like, imagine a very young kid who's like 3, who normally gets all the love and attention that the kid needs and deserves, right? But there's a moment that's like, oh, the adult needs to take care of something really important. It's adult business that needs to be done. And the little kid's like pulling at the trouser leg, going, give me attention, give me attention. And you're like, no, hang on. And you just kind of tune it out. That's in a way what this is like. It's not quite like that, but it's like, this is the left hand is trying to get your attention, and you go, no, I'm not giving it my attention. My attention's going on the melody. And even when I'm sight reading, I do that as well, because this is just what you practice. And I think a lot of the time this isn't really sort of made very clear to a lot of learners. A lot of the time, I think this is just like, you either do this or you don't. And if you do this, then you become really good and go to music college and end up becoming professional. But not many people actually explain this. Anyhow, so this gets really important as the left hand gets trickier and trickier. So if we go, well, the whole thing really, but let's see, bar 21. Oh yes, and here you don't want to bring all of this down. Let's go from bar 19. So again, trying not to listen to the left hand that much, which is challenging. Now here. And you'll notice, I still keep listening to this note here. It's not this. Now, and you know, that's one reason why it says MP, but this is background, and you need to, in your mind, be, this is foreground, this is background, and whatever's in the background, you don't pay that much attention to. And then here, this is sort of in between the foreground and the background. So you had and then here, this isn't quite the foreground, because this oh, excuse my and I bet you that most people who think they've learnt this probably won't be able to sing that. And I can guarantee that almost everyone who learns this, they're going to play with the right hand. And not really listen to that tune that much, but it needs to be this. So the right hand's got to be really background. So. Notice that the right hand was not intruding into all of those things that much. And now here, we don't just bash all these out, because the melody is this. I'm going to go from bar 37. So we've got that's your melody. Your melody is not that's not your melody. So sorry for hammering it there. So and then this, the G. So and then these not that loud, because it does this. And I've got to say, the way that this has been written for the piano makes this unbelievably difficult to pull off. And I found it really hard in my performance to be to hear, because this the chord is an F dominant 7, and then this G, which is the melody, is a non-chord tone, so we lean into that, and it needs to resolve to the F, which is like a tension release, although we still have the tension of the dominant. So tension, a little bit of release, and then this is like a triumphant arrival in the new key. So to try and sum that up, loud, background, foreground, tension, foreground release, and then we've arrived with the melody being at the top. This in the left hand is not important. Foreground, and then foreground in the right hand. Now the left hand here, there's a lot of jumping about. It's tricky, but this needs to just be in the background. Can you see how I can do this? I can do this and look at you and chat, and I'm almost sight reading it. I don't really need to think about it. That's what it needs to be like. All your focus is on the right hand. Da dum, da da dum, da dum, whatever it is. Da. And this is a non-chord tone. It's the 7 that really needs to resolve. Dum, dum, da, dum, dum, da, da, and so on and so on. So hopefully you can see what I mean, that these are the things that you need to do to look after this piece, which is basically you make sure you are focusing on the things that are foreground. So here, dum, da, 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 dum, dum, da, dum, dum, and this is not foreground. The bass notes are.